Hello, ladies, and welcome to Deep Dive for week 5. We are going to have a little learning about lachrymatories, tear jars, and I'm super excited. Someone did a deep dive for me and then put it in a website, and I learned a ton. It's actually called lachrymatory.com. Someone spent a few years researching them, looking for examples of them in antiquity and all kinds of things, and made a website. So at any rate, we're going to just dive in here. The first textual message that there is about these things are in the Bible. And Kristi mentions that, but I didn't see much more of an actual text that talked about them earlier than Psalm 56:8, which in the NLT says, "You can keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." And how beautiful is it that we have his permission to bring our sorrows and deepest longings to Jesus. And I just love knowing that he can handle us. That gives me so much hope. I don't know about you guys, but I have been thinking about this a lot last month and a half or so. It's been really hard in our family, and oh my goodness, I need this. So I love that the Jewish people take the Bible and they try and live it out. And I love that Kristi in her book talks about how people were carrying around lachrymatories about 3,000 years ago because they wanted to live out the words of David's psalm. I just think that's amazing. So I'm going to flip over to lachrymatory.com, and there's a lot of pictures on there. So I am just going to share my screen with you, and we're just going to kind of go through some of the pictures. So we have apparently a lot of examples of these from around 100 AD, like Kristi talked about in the video, that's what hers is dated from. And I just think these are beautiful. Apparently that's about the time that the glass blowing techniques got more sophisticated. And so a lot of them were made. But even before this, apparently they were found commonly in Egyptian tombs, more amongst the wealthy, not so much amongst the poor, but these were found there even before this time. And I learned something else really interesting is that, we heard about mourners that are paid to cry and wail at funerals. And apparently they were also paid to collect their tears. So when there was the procession for the funeral, they would bring their lachrymatories with them. And as they were paid to wail and mourn, they also collected their tears. And sometimes that would be buried with the person. Sometimes it would be poured out on their grave. That brings a different level to me to this paid mourner thought that, I've known about, but had never paired those two things together ever. And I love the quote from this website. It says that the more anguish and tears produced, the more important and valued the deceased person was perceived to be. And apparently the mourners that had much better lacrima ducts in their eyes that could produce more tears, apparently they got paid more because they could produce a much more full tear bottle during this ceremony, which I think is kind of wild. And let me flip my notes here. So I'm going to flip over here to the Victorian era. So apparently in the 19th century, when there was a huge culture of mourning surrounding, the period, that age, they started collecting tears at mourning parties, and even men would collect their tears. And apparently This is so funny to me. They made cigar-shaped lachrymatories so that men would feel more comfortable putting their tears in something a little bit more masculine. Like, okay, so that was like a funny thing I learned about lachrymatories. Like they took the shape of cigars to make the men feel like okay crying at funerals, I guess. Really funny. And apparently also special stoppers were created with a little hole in the top. So once you could know when you were done mourning by the fact that your lachrymatory tears had evaporated. And then at that point, you could stop your official mourning. I think this is just absolutely fascinating. And hop over the pond to the same period of time, but during the Civil War, which is so funny. I hadn't ever really thought about the Civil War happening at the same time as the Victorian era in England. But yes, and of course, America, being a former British colony not that long before, was definitely influenced by the Victorian culture. And there was an interesting practice where men would leave their wives with a lachrymatory before they left for the Civil War. And apparently we're hoping that they would return home to a full bottle. And of course, a lot of men didn't make it home. But sometimes these were saved and passed on to future generations, which I also think is super interesting. And someday I will come across a lachrymatory in a museum and I'll have my mind totally blown. I love this. I love this history. So I'm going to stop sharing with you because did you know that Kristi McLelland actually sells tear jars on her website that are modeled closely to the one that she received when she was in Israel. And when I was in Franklin, Tennessee, gosh, was it was in August, so I guess 2 months ago now, I thought, I wonder if she's going to sell them. Then I don't have to pay for shipping. Yay, I got one. And let me just tell you, I've thought about this tear jar quite a bit in the last month and a half. Like if I had been really collecting my tears, I don't know, it might have been about here. Like we have had such a hard month. And if you follow me on social media, you'll see it because I posted something and I was kind of amazed at what came out from that. So much encouragement, but also people DMing me, telling me stuff that's causing their kids to fall apart too. Like this is a really hard time in our society. And maybe it's time to resurrect the meaning of these and knowing in the depths of our souls that Jesus can handle us. He can handle our tears. He's collecting them. And he wants to be our source of comfort. So I don't know which of you needs that message today. Seems like there's a lot of hard stuff going on. But if we're living like a river, I just need to throw this all back on you guys. You are loved and you are cared for, and Jesus wants to meet every one of your needs, and he can handle you falling apart on him. And I needed that reminder this month for sure. Maybe one of you does too. And that's all I got. So I pray that you will live like a river. Lord, please meet these women where they're at. Please help them to fall apart on you when they need to. And please fill them with your absolute abundant love and the knowledge that their tears really do matter. Amen. Have a great week, and I will see you next time.